Last minute shakeup at 5:30 a.m., laundry situation not good. And when your focus is on helping your clients, it's easy to forget about yourself. But NASM knows trainers.
Morning, Ryan. Is okay with
And staying in front of the day isn't always
Thanks,
as simple
Ryan.
as 1,
What's
2,
up?
3. So when the unexpected has you pressing pause,
What's the latest on creatine?
I'm going to get back to you on that.
let NASM1 help you press play. Visit NASM.org to sign up for a membership today.
Well, hello there, listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, wellness coach, and well-being expert, Darlene Marshall. And if you've hung around here for a while, if you've been on the Better Than Fine train for a minute, you've heard me talk before about diet trends and the way in which the diet and the food and the health industries all kind of cycle through the way that they sell us information about diet. And essentially it breaks down to this. If I want to sell the next like big ticket, blockbuster diet, New York Times bestseller, woo program, I'm probably going to do it by telling you everything you think you know about nutrition is wrong. And so if we rewind the tape, at least within my lifetime, sometimes my lifestyle, at least within my lifetime, there was low fat everything, like fat was the enemy, based off the idea that fat was causing heart attacks. And like, it was more that everybody was smoking cigarettes and drinking a ton. And like, everybody was super stressed out. Then it was carbs. Carbs were the devil, right? And so first we had like margarine replacing butter. And then we had like low carb everything. And then it was like, oh, no, it's net carbs, not like actual carbs and fiber, right? It was just this weird thing that happened. And then it was paleo. Everything's got to be paleo. Oh my God. And right now, the big current trend right now is that everything is protein. Eat more protein, have more protein. Now, sometimes we stumble across some hypocrisy in these trends, and that's partly the way in which the marketing for this works. So depending how a particular author, it used to be authors back in like the 80s, 90s, early aughts. Now it's influencers tend to be leading the big diet trends. Depending how they learned marketing, it's very likely that they learned marketing based on agitating a problem, right? We're going to make you uncomfortable by pointing out to you how uncomfortable you are. Like, oh, cramps, bloating, headaches, whatever, like whatever the thing is that they're agitating on. Little bit of shame, little bit of nagging, little bit of like body stuff in there. And then they sell you the solution. So let me like agitate the problem and then sell you the solution. And if you always need a new thing to sell, right? Because eventually everybody gets onto your diet trend and then you got to sell the next trend. You always need a new thing to sell. And if you're selling based off of fear and guilt and shame, right? These negative emotional triggers that are far more activating than just like, hey, do you want to feel good? Do you want to be happy in your life? Which is, what we're selling here. Eventually, if I'm selling trends, if I'm selling agitation, I'm going to circle back on something I've struggled with before, something, I'm going to run out of things to make a problem with. A while ago, I was speaking with my friend, Jerry. What's up, Jerry? And we were talking about this nutrition trends thing. And I said, like, Jerry, mark my words. In the next few months, you're going to start hearing the problems with protein. And sure enough, yesterday, it stumbled across my feed. So last night I was scrolling along the internet and I came across an article about like the demonization of too much protein. And essentially what it was saying was that this hyper protein fixation has resulted in a fiber deficiency. And now we're at a place where, because people are supplementing so much with their protein and their meal replacements, that they're eating so little plants, it's causing all these other problems. And part of this, I believe, is the push for over supplementation. And the frustrating part of the article was that their solution to this problem was to sell fiber supplements instead of being like, eat some vegetables, this author was saying like, okay, our hyper focus on protein means that people aren't getting enough fiber. So here are the fiber supplements you should take. And I'm like, no, the fiber supplements you should take is eating plant foods, please. Okay. Anyway, whatever. That is the nature of nutrition fads, is this cyclical marketing where we start to say like everything you know is wrong. That's not what I'm trying to do with this episode. Okay. I want to open up your internal conversation, or maybe an external conversation. If you're watching on the live stream, leave it in the comments. If you're watching the follow-up, know that I always check the comments on our episodes. So if you ever want to be in this dialogue, that is another way to be in it. We're seeing evidence right now, very clear evidence over the last few years about ultra-processed foods. Now, if you want the deep dive nerd out, we've done that. We did multiple episodes on ultra-processed foods last year when we started to see this very clear meta-analysis level, scoping review level about the effects of ultra-processed foods on the body and on health outcomes. But the short version, if you don't want to go do the deep nerd out, the short version is the more calories a person consumes, the greater percentage of calories a person consumes that are ultra processed, the worse their health outcomes. Now, that's not going to be ubiquitous for everyone. We're talking about population level data, but trend wise, across our country, the higher percentage of someone's calories that come from an ultra processed foods, the worse their health outcomes are. Now, let's just break this down for just a second. When I say ultra processed, if I took yeast, water, flour, sugar, and made a loaf of bread, that is a processed food because those are whole food, normal culinary ingredients that I put together and made bread with. That is processing. Baking is a process. Mashing is a process. Peeling is a process. Okay. So processed foods in themselves are not bad. Humans have been eating processed foods for millennia since the discovery of fire. It is part of how our brains got so big. It is a good thing. However, an ultra-processed foods are foods that contain industrialized ingredients. And we're going to break all that down in a second, but I want to parse that out for you to say, it's not just that having processed foods is the problem. The greater percentage of ultra-processed foods, the worse health outcomes. Okay. So a few months ago, on a whim, as I was nerding out about ultra-processed foods on the show, I posted to Threads, quote, "Sorry to burst your bubble. Protein powder is an ultra-processed food." End quote. My Lanta, oh my goodness, the internet just like blew up in my general direction. So whoo howdy the responses I got. Some people were saying, well, duh, obviously, what did you think it was? Caw. Some people were like, that is ridiculous. What are you even talking about? They're a health food. It's a health supplement. You're crazy. Because they think ultra-processed food is like Doritos. Some people questioned my intelligence or expertise. I always love that. I love when you put out an opinion that anybody reacts to like, well, that's very contrary to my worldview. You must not know what you're talking about. Cool, dude. Thanks. And then some people really roasted the idea that I had some point I was trying to make that was, again, counter to the points that they believe they were inferring meaning. And really the thing I was just saying was this objective fact. Protein powder is an ultra-processed food. Now, I want to back up what I mean by that. You're listening to the Better Than Fine podcast. I am your host, Darlene Marshall, and protein powder, is it ultra-processed? Hey, the answer is yes. Most protein powder is ultra-processed, meaning that most protein powders use industrial ingredients, artificial sweeteners, anti-caking agents, preservatives, artificial flavorings. Even if they're derived from a natural source, if they are industrially processed and manipulated in an industrial way, that still derives it into being a synthetic industrialized compound in the food. And that is what makes it an ultra-processed food. And to take it one step further when it comes to protein powder, because it's a supplement, it's actually governed differently by the FDA than if it was a food. But that's a story for another time. What does that mean and why does that matter? And this is really the crux of the episode. This is the thing I wanted to talk about with you. Because I can state that objective fact. Most protein powders are ultra processed. And people are going to infer a bunch of meaning, or at least they did on Threads, and maybe you do listening to this right now. People infer what that means. And I want to argue with you a few points. The first being that it's an objective fact, and then each of us gets to decide what it means for us in our life based on our values, based on our belief systems. And one of the things I see consistently in my 13 years in the fitness and wellness space is the way in which we create a value judgment, a set of beliefs and values that we try to force on other people, especially as influencers, about what these things should mean to like a good and healthy person, as if that was our responsibility. And if you know anything about coaching, of course, I don't think that that's our responsibility. So why does it matter? What does it mean and why does it matter if protein powders, most protein powders, because there's a couple of people who really started out like, I can make my own protein powder and it doesn't have to be, and I'm like, yes, you can. And all natural protein powder that is just protein isolate tastes terrible. And that's why most people don't like it. The supplement company wouldn't make much money that way. So right now, we don't know which industrial ingredients are causing the most trouble to our health. This is one of the problems that's currently coming up in the nutrition guidance space, is that the evidence is very clear: higher percentage of calories, worse health outcomes. I think you've got that part down now. But there's all of this argument and interjection and claiming of expertise that's happening on social media, when for the most part, we actually don't really know which industrial compounds are causing the problems and in what volumes and how we go about it. Now, there is some evidence, right? I see people out there talking about seed oils like, some evidence that anti-caking agents and emulsifiers, I always want to say emollients, emulsifiers, anti-caking agents and emulsifiers have been shown to irritate the gut, cause inflammation in the gut lining that then can lead to downstream problems in the body. Okay. If you want to nerd out about that super hard, go listen to the episode we just did on the gut microbiome and why harming the gut microbiome and the gut lining is bad for our health. But the short version is, we know that some emulsifiers and anti-caking agents have been shown to irritate the gut lining, to damage the gut microbiome, and to have downstream negative effects on health. Things like systemic inflammation, autoimmune disease, even affecting A1C. Your body naturally produces semaglutides, like when you want to go off on a topic and you want to run down a rabbit hole and then you can't think of the words, that's what just happened inside my brain. In the presence of these industrial chemicals, industrial food additives, and the absence of plant foods and adequate fiber, we develop inflammation and other inflammation-related problems in the gut. We have some evidence about that. Not all protein powders are created equal. Some are just protein isolate, as I just said, but they don't taste very good. And that's why that's not most of what people are getting. And what we're seeing in the trend, right? Because I love trend level data. I love looking at the bigger picture and saying, what's the pattern here? How do we change the pattern instead of nitpicking one day at a time? When we look at the trend, we're seeing people who begin to aggressively supplement protein changing the food system of their life in a way that they then eat fewer and fewer whole foods. So a greater and greater percentage of their calories are coming from ultra processed foods. And we know that's not a healthful long-term outcome. So the first reason I want to talk about protein powder and ultra processing is just to own that that's a feedback loop that some people are creating in their lives. And let's own, some fitness and wellness professionals are advising it, but it's counter to our current understanding of how bodies work in a health prioritizing way. And if the conversation is about health and well-being, we don't want to do things that we have now learned are counter. And the thing I haven't talked about on the show along these lines is that it's not that like nutrition science is lying to us. It's not that, health science is lying to us. It's that as we learn new things and we see new problems arise and we develop new understandings, we want to continue to evolve our thinking. The problem I have with it is when it becomes a marketing machine that just like lies to people to make money. Cool. So that actually brings me to the second big point of this episode. The second reason that I want you to care about whether or not your protein powder or the protein powder that some influencers are pushing is ultra processed is that there are a lot of influencers out there who are pushing whole foods as a value system and then also pushing supplement sales so that they can get their discount code like influencer kickback. You're listening to the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Marshall, and we're taking a look at, is protein powder ultra processed? And what does that mean for us in terms of our health, our well-being, and how we go about our wellness journey? So lots of influencers push supplements and discount codes. I probably get an email almost every day, if not multiple per day, from different brands offering me like an influencer code. And essentially the way that works is if I'm out here like making content and I give you the code and you use it, I might get 5%, 10%, whatever percent of the sale price, or I might get free stuff. If you follow me on socials, you know that I don't really do that. I don't buy into that kind of content marketing. I think not only is it typically that the person doesn't actually like use that product, but it also like doesn't actually work very well unless you have millions of followers. And I think at this point, most people are to the point that they're like, I don't want to be subject to this because the game is up, right? So supplements companies need to create demand as part of their marketing strategy, right? They got to go out there and do that negging thing I was talking about, that thing where they say, well, this is the problem and here's your solution, buy our stuff. What we're getting out there is these big footprint influencers who are demonizing some behaviors in order to create demand, but also they're creating an image based in a value system that they're trying to sell, right? So this kind of like, I am perfect and whole and good because I eat whole foods or whatever. That is part of their marketing strategy, is creating this public persona, creating this value system. But where I get stuck, because hypocrisy is my kryptonite, like I've been thinking about this all day. Obviously if you watch on the live stream, or if you've met me in person, I love Wonder Woman. And like, what's Wonder Woman's kryptonite? It's hypocrisy. I have a really hard time with the tension between an espoused value system and a lived behavior that's either unexamined or directly counter to it. For me, it feels like I cannot trust anything this person says. So you have people out here who are pushing clean eating as an ideal, as a lifestyle, as this is what you need to do to be whole and happy and well and perfect. And then also pushing supplements, because 98% of the time, I was going to say 95, but I'm like, it's too low. Most supplements are ultra processed in their nature. The way that supplements are made is partly the mixing in of anti-caking agents so that it can sit on the shelf for a really long time and not show up to you like a brick. Part of it is I know I keep saying emollients, emulsifiers, getting mixed in so that if there is some kind of like fat molecule in there, it stays in suspension in a powder, right? Like this is how these things work. But then they go in our gut and they do stuff that they're not meant to be there, right? It's like eating plastic. So if we're going to make clean eating this ideal, we can't then also be saying, and you have to have my protein powder, and you have to have my creatine, and you have to have my this, and you have to have my that. I don't care if you take those supplements, but don't then make a persona that we can't trust because you're also pushing the idea that we have to, soft quotes, eat clean. Because that's a lie at that point if you're also selling supplements. And where all this is going, if you're wondering, Darlene, where is all this going? So yesterday I read this study, I alluded to it earlier, that right now we're at a point that only 7% of Americans are eating the minimum recommended amount of fiber each day. And at the end of last year, I read a report that said that only 10% of Americans are getting the minimum recommendation of vegetables every day. I think it's possible that the data set for this new study was newer. I think it's also possible that people are eating a lot of low fiber. Like the people who are eating vegetables might be eating like iceberg lettuce, which has like no fiber in it, which results in both a deficit of vegetable and fiber. And what I predict here, just like I said in the beginning, I predicted to my friend Jerry, like, hey, we're going to see this start to pop up in the next few months. People are going to start talking about, oh, too much protein, too much this. It's going to become the new demon. And then they're going to have a new thing they push. And apparently it's fiber because they've already done all 3 macronutrients. Now we got to do fiber. And if you don't know what fiber, like the definition of fiber literally is carbohydrates that your body cannot metabolize. So they're not considered like carbs in your metabolism. It's what your gut microbiome eats. I think that we're going to see in this trend toward hyper-supplementation because people apparently just want like a checkbox of light switch flip. They want an easy answer. And as they push toward that even more, what we're going to see is increases in colorectal cancers, more than we already have. The other day I saw there was, I don't remember who it was, but it was a public figure who they had an impacted bowel. And if you don't know what that means, it means you got so constipated that it damaged the organ. Impacted bowel from eating the carnivore diet. And if you don't know what the carnivore diet is, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's eating nothing but meat. So we're going to see these increases in that kind of injury, in colorectal cancers, inflammation, IBS, irritable bowel disease, IBD, autoimmune diseases, which result often from damage to the gut. If you've never had that kind of constipation before, it's very stressful. The stress makes you sick. Like you get really sick. And the negative impact on the gut microbiome that comes when we don't eat plant foods. And I also want to own, so that you don't think I'm a hypocrite, I use a protein supplement on my very heavy lifting days. It's not a meal replacement. It's a yes and. And what I found is that when I do that, I recover faster from those lifts so I can get farther with my life. But I also eat a ton of whole foods, like just a ton. So that protein supplement is a low percentage of my calories over the course of the day and the week because I'm eating a lot of whole foods, a lot of plant foods, a lot of actual fiber in my food instead of fiber in like as a supplement. The last time I was paying a trainer to guide me to prep for my wedding 3 years ago, they had me supplementing way more protein than I supplement now. It had taken up an excise number of my calories because I was tracking my macros. And I ended developing a ton of gut problems. When I went to the doctor about it, their answer was just start supplementing. And the supplement they recommended to me very common one. You'd know the name if I said it. It's on the shelf. It's an orange can. Ultra processed, artificial flavors, artificial anti-caking agents. There were non-ultra processed alternatives to that same supplement. My doctor did not recommend them, right? Because it's just so ingrained in our culture now that we're pushing people toward it as an easy button in the belief that people won't do the healthful thing. And honestly, the healthful thing is just eat lots of vegetables, my friends. It's a whole picture. And I look at trend level data because I'm looking at the system in someone's life when I help them work on this stuff. So if you're skipping meals just to pound more supplements, that's not about well-being and health. And it's cool if you don't care. If your goals are about something other than well-being and health, if you just do not care, you just want like whatever that aesthetic outcome or that performance outcome is, that's cool. But also, if you are fitness minded, if you are wellness minded, if you are a coach, if you are a content creator, if you are someone out there who is giving people advice, and most people now are getting their public health guidance from influencers, not from doctors, not from health journalists, from influencers, I just suggest that you really consider when you're doing it for your own aesthetics, own that. When you're trying to teach it to other people, own what it's actually about. And if we can find a way to take the value stuff out, if we're actually just out here kind of being hypocrites. And then I also want to throw out this one last bit of guidance and advice. Like for each of us, this is what I've said about ultra processed foods for 2 years since I read that first meta-analysis on it. We all get to decide where our line is. We all have to decide, this is what my values are. This is what's important to me and what we care about, and then make our decisions based off of that. But we can't do that effectively if we're not getting honest information, if we're not being honest with ourselves about what we're consuming. And the studies I'm seeing is that most people are underestimating the amount of calories that are ultra processed, partly because food marketing is pushing this idea that like, oh, it's natural, oh, it's whole, when it's got stuff in it that isn't. And if you are supplementing, and on a day that you supplement anything, you're developing stomach cramps, you're developing diarrhea, you're bloating, that is your gut telling you something's up. And there's something about it you don't like, your body doesn't like. And you might want to consider, if you do supplements and your body has that reaction and your goal is health and well-being, try experimenting with some things that are less processed and eating more plant foods, because I can't tell you how much I'm encountering this right now, where people just are taking for granted that your gut's just going to feel trashy. And what I'm finding very consistently is that it's people who are under eating plants, over supplementing, eating more ultra processed foods than they realize, and they don't understand that a healthful gut doesn't feel bad. And I don't even just mean like, oh, you're in your 20s and everything feels good. I mean like 50s, 60s, 80s. You don't have to suffer. It's your body trying to tell you something important. And learning to listen, like any other language, takes a little bit of time and experimentation. But ding dang, is it so worth it? So that's my 2 cents. Is protein powder ultra processed? Yes. Is that inherently a bad thing? No. And should you be supplementing protein powder? I don't know. The answer to every training question is it depends. It depends on your goals, your movement behavior. Are you getting enough protein? There are plenty of studies that show as we age, supplementing protein actually improves all-cause mortality. But if you're eating a lot of garbage food and then you just tell yourself like, oh, but this has 20 grams of protein in it and it's still ultra processed, maybe stop lying to yourself. Just own where you're at. That's my 2 cents. Okay, I would love to hear your feedback. I'm hoping I push some buttons with this one. Email me. It is info@darlene.coach, or of course, leave a comment if you're watching on the replay. We live stream every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern time here on the NASM YouTube channel. You can Instagram, I'm darlene.coach. You can find me on LinkedIn. If you're a fan of the show, I hope that you've subscribed. But if you haven't, do that, my friends. Like it, comment, share, do all the things, because you know that I love it. And if you haven't let us a review, maybe go ahead and do that too, because it does actually help the show to grow. Thank you so much. Take good care of yourselves and be well.